We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I'm the Partnerships and Community Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I'm very excited to welcome our next guest onto the show, Joseph Ifiegbu. He is the co-founder and CEO of eqtble. Joseph, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, how did you answer the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Thank you so much, Christina, for having me. I am Joseph Ifiegbu, the co-founder CEO of eqtble. My pronouns are he, him, his. In terms of answering the question, what I want to be when I grow up, I think I had crazy ideas and crazy dreams. I wanted to be an aeronautic engineer / pilot. So that was so a bit about myself. I grew up in Nigeria, so I'm from Nigeria originally. I grew up the first say 10, 11 years of my life was really there. And so, it was a lot of, typical Nigerian parents would be like, you're either a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer, one of those three. And so when I looked at engineering, I had older cousins that were maybe computer engineers and so I was trying to figure out what is the craziest engineering program I could go after. And I was like, oh, planes. And one of my uncle told me, aeronautics is you can do planes. And I love planes. And I used to just be aeronautical engineer. And later that changed so much as I grew up. But that was the first dream, I guess.
I love it. Dream big. And that's highly specific as well. What would you say defines you today?
I think for me, what defines me, I think it's setting worldview in terms of just showing love to people. I think that's the biggest thing for me. I think that guides how I deal with my friends, family, and my work, really, right? And so being able to kind of just be authentic and show as much love and care to people around you. So be it just in any of your relationships, right? So personal relationships and work relationships, you approach your work with love what you do, in terms, how you treat your coworkers, your colleagues, with the utmost respect, right? That underlying thing of love and respect for people that you work with. And I think that just really defines how I approach everything. And today, so I'm a data scientist by training, but I wouldn't have gone down that route if I didn't love statistics and I didn't love math. And so I think that's the driving force for a lot of things that I do today.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important, especially for leaders, to lead with empathy and love and compassion for their team, understanding that people are full individuals inside and outside of work. I was reading in preparation for our interview around your bio, and you led WeWork's people analytics team. And for folks, especially who are not familiar with quote unquote people analytics, how did you prioritize what data you were looking for as a leader of the team?
Yeah, so it was interesting because I actually got into HR analytics, was by mistake almost. It was, because I was at a prior company at the time, and I've been there for about 2 years and looking for a new role. And so I was working as a data scientist, doing a lot of e-commerce retail kind of analytics. And so I've done a lot of work when it comes to consumer behaviors, right? So it was a lot of things around for example, market basket analysis, whereby if a mom buys a formula, what are the chances they're going to buy the pacifier, right? Mm-hmm. Things like that. And so looking at those relationships between products, and then that actually affected where we put the pacifier. So if you go, in the stores, we'll have the formula and we'll have the pacifier right next to it at eye level, because there was this connection that we saw in terms of buying patterns. And so I like this idea around human decisions and how they thought about just the decisions with using analytics. And so when I started for a new role, I just came across randomly this word, and it said people analytics. I'm like, what is that? I'm I've never heard of that. I'm like, this sounds interesting. It's analytics about people. I'm like, great. And so I started reading it. I was like, this is fascinating. So it's something with HR. I'm like, okay. And so I just applied because it looked interesting to me, right? And so I'm grateful. Like I was given the opportunity to come in, and because I was like, yeah, like, for me, it was like, well, it's a different domain, but the concepts of analytics really remains the same, right? Like you're taking data, you're making sense of it, and you're using it to make decisions, right? That applies to every domain. It doesn't really matter if it's HR or e-commerce or marketing or anything like that, right? And so yeah, so when I came in, really how I prioritized like what data to or to go after really was based off of initially based off of just the issues that I saw on ground at the time, right?
Right.
And so some of the questions that were being asked was, well, we're growing too fast. A lot of people also leaving, right? So why? Like, we have a high attrition. Like, so why are people leaving? Okay, we're growing fast. Are we actually hiring? Like, is there a balance in terms of like, gender, ethnicity, race break? Like, are we hiring enough women? Like, are we like, like, is there more towards men? Like, these are the questions that were coming up. And so I was like, well, that is the first thing I need to tackle. And so I just started getting data for those particular questions that I was getting from executives. And so, yeah, just kind of those low hanging fruit. We started with that. And then eventually we kind of started doing other things that were more proactive. But it was initially very reactive because of, like you've grown by 2000, you have 2,000 employees and literally no analytics.
Yeah. No, especially when you're in that hyper growth environment and you see people are leaving, you're seeing attrition rates and you're thinking about retention, you can track these metrics and understand kind of asking these big questions as you're talking about, have hypotheses, and then look at the data to see if you are correct there as well. When you were thinking about scaling your own team, where did you start in building out team members to help kind of support this like people analytics function?
Yeah, so the way I thought about it was, you needed the foundational, like you need to get the data into into a format that made sense, right? Like, we had different systems. So how do we get data into a format that makes sense before we can do analytics? Before we can talk about this fancy algorithms we're going to run, like we need to get the data, we need to get it clean and structured. And so, yeah, my first two hires was a data engineer and a data scientist, right? Because I had a data engineer, so we can work on in terms of like, okay, we're creating the pipelines from all those different HR systems, right? To bring into the database, and then data scientists that work with us in terms of, okay, taking out that data and starting to at least make sense of it. But the data scientist, like, the skill set that he had was a lot of the skill set was around visualization. So not the hardcore, like, running like the ML models. No, the focus was my visualization. Why? At the time, well, they had not seen, it was crazy. Like, they had not seen a chart of headcount growth ever. They had
Yeah.
not there was no story. And so we're like, well, we need to tell a story. And visually was one of the best ways to tell it. That was the first thing. And second thing, HR people love charts. They love the colors. They love that, right? And so we started with that. So I remember the first time we delivered like the Tableau dashboard, and we didn't even have like server. It was like Tableau reader. Like, it was just something. And they were blown away. They were like, wait, what? This is account growth. This is the treasure. And they just like asking more questions. And they had like, and so we'll create like this package, like workbook, and send out every day maybe every Monday or and then they were loving it. And that's kind of really how we built like buy-in over time. But those are the first two hires that we made.
I love that. I think data and data visualization that tells a story is so interesting and something that a lot of folks, including myself, get kind of excited about as well. And you have those benchmarks too. One of the questions that kind of you alluded to as well when you were talking about the data too, and if people are leaving, is this question of, is the environment you are creating for employees inclusive, and do people feel like they could do their best work? Do they belong? I read in one of your other blog posts, you shared that inclusivity doesn't just happen by default because you will it to. And I definitely agree with that as well. What are kind of deliberate ways that companies can operationalize really inclusive practices coming from, a person with a lot of data experience?
Yeah. So, a lot of times, even like my prior roles, right? You see this thing where the company is growing, right? Like, you're growing very fast. And a lot of times I get it, right? Because, like, I'm building a startup, and, there's this thing about, oh yeah, you want to grow. And a lot of times that, let's just bring in people just so they can get the job done, write the code, do whatever we need them to do, right? And then later you look back and next, you're like 3,000 employees and you've not like actually prioritized anything around any kind of DEI, or just you have not been any particular structure. So then you all of a sudden you realize, oh yeah, we're 90% men, right? All of a sudden you wake up one day, you're 90% men, right? And so you're like, wait, whoa. But that is, so I think some of the ways that companies can do that is really, I mean, it's really establishing, right? Setting structures from the get-go, right? So right from your hiring processes all the way to things internally like a promotion processes. So I'll give you two examples.
Okay.
On the hiring processes side, right? You're trying to hire people. A lot of times, if you bring in, let's say, a set of men, let's say three men are the only people interviewing for a role. So three men that went to Yale, nothing against Yale, just an example.
Just example.
Yeah, three men that went to Yale or some like Ivy League. If they're interviewing people, often there's also, again, people have like subconsciously, like, oh, you maybe attracted to someone that's similar to you, but oh, I like this person. This person went to the same kind of school as me, whatever, right? And so you might end up if there's only three men doing that, they might end up hiring, let's say there's 100 people apply, they might end up hiring, you're trying to hire 100 people, for example. They might end up hiring 80% men like them. Why? It's just not like they want to do like, yes, this is what we want to do. No, just subconsciously, oh, this person has the same experience. It's easy to do that, right? It's easy to just, oh yeah, the person has the same experience as me. Yeah, boom, done. But no, one thing companies can do, which I've seen done well, Snap did something like this when I worked at Snap, was they had this candidate, this like panel whereby you had a diverse team interview each candidate that came in. So now the diverse teams could be like, different gender, race, ethnicity, orientation. So that way you're having different perspectives on the candidates that came in, right? A diverse candidate slate we had. And so that ensured that even if let's say one person has another bias, another person has then we end up having a conversation and then we checked those biases during those conversations. And then that ensured that each role we had at least a good diverse set of candidates that came in there as well. So everyone was being given a fair shot and a fair chance, because now you're actually, removing that as opposed to just like the same group of people, one person just making that decision, making that call. So that's on the hiring side. On the other side, in terms of when the person becomes an employee, one of the things that companies can actually do is, well, like, again, this goes back to, companies say, hey, yes, we have like 50% women, great. But like most of the women are in the lower levels.
Yeah.
Of the organization.
Yeah.
So like if you're making decisions, then that's not being inclusive of like, yes, you have diversity, but you don't have inclusion because they're at the lower levels. Mm-hmm. So again, when you're promoting people into this, like, you have to check those criteria. Make sure you have a diverse, again, slate in terms of those decisions that are being made, as opposed to just like being made by a certain group of people who say, no, this is how we should do it. Again, so it's not enough to have 50% women. That's great. However, it's only great if, again, it's normally distributed, whereby you have women in leadership, women at lower levels, women in mid-management. Then that makes more sense, right? So taking those steps in terms of your promotion practices or your pay practices to ensure that people are being represented is one of the ways I think companies can like do better at that.
Absolutely. You want to have people coming in through your pipeline, and candidate experience is really important, but how long are those women, for this example, staying at the organization? Is it only 3 months? Are they in manager roles? Are they being paid equally to other folks in the organization? It's definitely a holistic ecosystem as well. It's not just looking at one part of the employee experience or the candidate experience as well. I know that, with the talent market that it is happening right now, a lot of folks are looking at their company culture, especially if they're in a remote first or a hybrid environment, testing things for the first time. And people want to measure the progress they're making in terms of being an employer of choice. What are qualitative and quantitative ways you kind of think about measuring company culture from a high level perspective?
Yeah, I mean, company culture, it's one of those things that it's a hard like, company culture is hard, right? Like creating a good culture, because it's something I say to my team, I've said it a bunch of times, is culture is the day-to-day decisions that you make, right? And then that kind of compounds over time and becomes kind of ethos or just the way of doing things in an organization. And a lot of times that starts on the top as well, right? That starts at the top in terms of okay, what's the relationship between the founders or co-founders or executive team or things like that, all the way to okay, well, how does executives or managers or leaders engage with their teams, and how do they, involve the teams in decisions and things like that. So I think I think leaders should, from the beginning, really think about every decision that they make, and how that affects the rest of the organization. So that's the one thing. In terms of culture, I think it's there are different ways to see like okay, well, how good is the culture, right? How
Right.
and, so, and some of the people, the ways people just go, like some of the ways that people check is like, oh, well, like what is our engagement, like what is our attrition, like those kind of things. I mean, I think some of those things can be indicative, right? But it's not the only thing, right? Like, so if you're looking at, let's say, your own engagement, and you're comparing it to, let's say, benchmark externally, yeah, okay, maybe that could. But I think one of the things companies can do is, well, let's look at your engagement and compare it to yourself internally. How are you doing compared to last year? How are you doing compared to last quarter? Like, how do your employees feel? Like, so internally, I usually encourage companies to say, hey, I know you want to look at external companies, how you're doing, but look at yourself internally. Are you making progress? Okay, if you see that a particular question in your service, or oh yeah, didn't do really well, and there was a particular reason, address those reasons, take those steps, and then really be transparent to the company as to what you were doing to fix those issues, and then see how that over time kind of gets better, right? Measure over time how you're doing. And so that's some of the ways you can see, like, like, okay, if you're doing well. But again, it's one of those things that it just really just goes back to the day-to-day decisions that you make. And so just being cognizant of those things and setting things, saying, okay, no, these are the values that we as a company are going to live by, and then hold people accountable, hold your managers accountable, and your managers in turn hold your managers accountable, and so on and so on, right?
Yep.
And I think if you can do that, then like I think you put yourself in a good place to kind of create a good culture in the long term.
I definitely agree that company culture is directly related to your everyday actions, especially as a leader. It's not only about having really strong values and having them on the kind of virtual whiteboard or in the kind of in-person kitchen as well. It's about how you live them day to day, and also asking folks across the organization, no matter if they're in informal or formal leadership positions, just how they feel when they're coming to work, how they feel about different initiatives that you're testing too. So that feedback is important. Oftentimes in these conversations as well, people want to know kind of how they're doing in their industry or how they're doing as a people team. But every organization and every leader, as we know, is at a different part of their, for example, equity and inclusion journey. What is your advice for benchmarking HR data when every company is different, even if you are in the same kind of funding category or employee size, and things of that nature?
Yeah, that's kind of why it's still to my that answer. The last question was like, start with the internal benchmarks, right? See how you're doing versus yourself, or see how you're doing versus like your organization as a whole. So let's say you're an engineering team. Well, how did you do? Like, how are you doing? Like, versus last year, like, from a diversity inclusion standpoint. Okay, yeah. Oh, we're an engineering team with 12% women. Okay, last year. What were you this year? Oh, we're 13%. Okay, you had a 1% increase. Interesting. Okay, well, compared to the rest of the organization, how was that? This is how we do compared to the rest of the organization. I think starting with that is important because a lot of times, I think, yes, it's fine to directionally look at like benchmarks in industry. Yeah. And that's great because it gives you an idea. Okay, well, how is the industry do? Okay, yeah, we're a tech team, but on average, the industry is about 10% women in tech. So we have 13%. So we're doing 3% better. Okay, fine. All in all, across, but that's bad, right? Right. But like, okay, yeah, we're doing this way, fine. That's all well and good. Gives you an idea of the market, gives you an idea of how things are, how the industry or every kind of company you're comparing to is growing. But I think like there's a potential downside to benchmarking, whereby it's like that sometimes I've seen it tend to keep selling companies in mediocrity. All right. So let's say you're 13% women in tech. And you look at the industry and it's 10%. You'd be like, oh, I'm doing well. But 13% women in tech is horrific. No, they're doing very well.
Honest,
We're 3%
yeah.
above. Yeah, we're doing better. 3% above industry. That's terrible,
It's terrible.
right?
Mhm.
Right. And so again, again, it goes back to what are the set of values that we're trying to build here. What is the culture we're trying to embrace and we're trying to build, and then you know not being afraid to actually set goals and maybe the benchmarks of the industry might think, oh my, that's actually like crazy. But speaking your truths and sticking with that. So if you say no, they're 10%, we're 13, but I want to get to 20. Yes, it might seem, oh, but that's way more. But no, that's what you as an organization have chosen because you want to make things better. You want to lead by example. So not just sticking to the benchmarks, because again, like how will anything change if everyone keeps sticking to this benchmark, right? Some people have to go against that and push the narrative forward so that the industry can catch up to that. As opposed to just saying, oh, I'm bad. Oh, it's 3%. No, you should actually do the improbable or do things people think it's impossible, like you know what I'm saying, and do that. And then the industry will follow suit, right? That's what I think leaders should start moving and thinking towards. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And also kind of your point of looking internally, the year over year performance, and also really that accountability piece of, okay, we are taking these measures, we're implementing these strategies. Is it working? And that qualitative data is important there. I want to ask kind of from your perspective as well, how you see employee feedback management. Again, you have that layer of trust that people are willing to give that feedback in the first place, but why is it important to really build that culture of listening, and how do you see that culture manifesting at organizations who are thriving, who are successfully attracting talent?
Yeah, I mean, people are the most important resource in your organization, right? Like like the seed of knowledge doesn't like dwell in the heads of the leaders. Like they don't have all the knowledge in the world. All right, and that's the thing, right? They're just human. That's it. Nothing more, nothing. Just they're human, right? They just happen to have a seed.
Mm-hmm.
That's see whatever sweet. Okay, great, good stuff. However, I know it's just because I see this ridiculous. Just sometimes just because I see like the best ideas can come from anyone in the organization. Anyone can deliver the best ideas, and so leaders have to have the humility to listen. It could be some associate that came out of college a year ago that can give you an idea that can change your organization for the better. So, but are you as a leader willing to be able to listen to that? Because these people are people that follow. They came to your organization for a mission because they believed in something that you were selling. They believe in something that you were doing, and they're giving their time, precious, the most precious resource. They're giving their time to you to work with you to create this organization. So the least you can do as an organization is actually listen to the ideas because they are there every day working, dealing with things and seeing that. And so there are certain things that as an executive or as a head of company, you might not see that are happening day to day. And so being able to kind of have that transparency, say, no, people can, listen to what people are saying. That is so important in terms of building culture, right? Culture, again, is built from the decisions. It's not built to say, no, this is what we're going to do and done, boom. No, this is the culture now. No, it's the day to day. Are you listening? Are you taking that feedback? Are you actually implementing it? Are you having those conversations? That is why I think it's important. Answer your question.
No, absolutely. I think that ideas can come from everywhere. Feedback is both positive, negative for innovation, everything in between as well. And you're right, the gift of time is so important and people's feedback. And again, you have to have that two-way communication of, even if you can't change something tomorrow, just hearing that, you're actively listening and this is, why the timeline is this way. The context is also important. In an ideal situation, folks would, be able to talk to their manager or give feedback at any time. But we know that everybody is bringing in their own experiences and working at great, maybe not so great company cultures, or feedback was welcome or not welcome. If you are part of, an organization where women are 13% of the organization, you might not want to raise your hand to say, this is my opinion. Why is it important to offer avenues for anonymous feedback at, companies with a thriving company culture too?
Yeah, because a lot of times, like I mean, there's no secret. There's an issue of trust in corporate culture, right? Like it's like there's that whole thing of like there's some companies that have done a good job in terms of having the psychological safety and that you can actually say something and you'll be all right. But in a lot of organizations, that's not the case. Like, people fear retaliation. Like people have mortgages and school fees.
Mhm.
Like, so people don't lose their jobs. Like if they speak up. And so, but like that's horrible that if you're going through something you can't speak up because you fear losing your job.
Mhm.
Right? That's not a that's that's ridiculous. Right. And so that's why things, like the platform that you all have, like, right. It's like this, given that avenue to say, look, I want to say this at the same time, I want to be able to keep my job in case.
Right.
And so being given that, so that would, the employees can actually speak freely and fully kind of give the details. And so I think that's important because yeah, it helps build some sort of psychological safety. It helps with the trust issue, knowing that okay, yes, like I can actually fully say what I want to say. And it's interesting. It's interesting. Like I've always I have this, I don't know, maybe this is a bit contrarian, but I don't know, I feel like HR functions, I've said it quite a few times, should be outsourced. I feel that sometimes that HR functions should be outsourced because, and the reason why I sometimes feel that way, and I go back and forth, I change my mind all the time, but but it's what if you're trying to, I've seen situations whereby someone was complaining about the person that receives this person that receives feedback from people, right? So if you're trying to complain about maybe your head of legal
Mhm.
or your head of employee relations, and that's the person that you complain about, that's the person that actually people go to complain to. So what do you do there? Like, who do you go to? Like there's all these like weird things. Oh, you're complaining to the head of employee relations
Mhm.
about someone that they get drinks with after work all the time and they're friends with, right? Like there are weird situations that come up at work like that. And so again, that's kind of why like tools like yours, I think it's powerful because now employees can actually go put in like, the complaints or whatever the feedback without fear of any kind of retaliation. There's a sense of trust and a sense of really psychological safety, which is important in work anyways, right? So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think, having an option where you can give your feedback anonymously and safely is really important as well. And what you mentioned in terms of dynamic relationships, power dynamics, no matter if you're a quote unquote flat organization, they just exist. And it's important to recognize that as well when you're trying to cultivate actively psychological safety. When you're thinking about the next generation of people leaders, from your perspective and experience, is there anything that folks really need to incorporate into their strategy to be successful? We've talked about the importance of data and transparency and building that trust, but also wanted to ask that open-ended question to you as well.
Yeah, yeah, data, right? But not just data, insights, right? Like, I think there's still a gap between having data and having insights. So being able to incorporate, like, okay, well, what are we gonna like, like just getting the insights out of the data and then the actions as well. So being action oriented is important, right? Because I've seen leaders that get the insights. Oh yeah, this is happening, and they don't do anything. They can be afraid in some cases sometimes to do to change. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, but this is okay, this is somewhat working. No, like change is uncomfortable, but you're better off for it in the future, right? And so being action oriented is really important in terms of strategy. And then really, people leaders, HR leaders, people analytics leaders. I think empathy. I keep going back to that. The empathy is a big one. So
Yeah.
yeah, you have your strategy. You have been, yes, you have your action and your data and insights. You're action oriented, but again, it's empathy because again, you're dealing with people. People are your most important resource, right? You don't people, you're not dealing with people like you're dealing with data, right? These are beating hearts, flesh and blood, and they matter. And so I think if you can treat people with respect, with love, with empathy, all those kind of things, as you make decisions, again, like in the long term, you build goodwill and you're better off for it. And so that's something I would say like leaders should kind of really pay attention to as they build organizations.
Mm-hmm. And really cultivating empathy in different ways throughout the organization, through relationships, through decision making, communication, transparent communication. That's so important. And we're talking about the great reshuffle, the great resignation, the great formation we've heard as well. Organizations are really focused on reducing turnover and increasing employee retention. When you're talking about love, respect, compassion. You've given some great examples like for benchmarking and what you've seen the data before, but how can companies really take action in reducing attrition? If you want to provide any like examples or things like that you've seen out in the world.
Uh, Ways to reduce, to increase employee engagement. Yeah, I mean, I think listening, right? Like it's we talk about like it's a, you know, it's a listening platform. It's like listening. It's important, right? Like I think, and then being able to adapt. That's a big thing. I've seen organizations say everyone must come back to the office. I'm like, what are you saying? Like, what are you, like it's like people have proven that they can do their jobs at home, right? You know, things have changed so much. Like, you know, people like maybe let's say they had a babysitter that used to come in and take care of the kid while they go to work. Maybe they can't do that anymore. So, you know, the parents have to be at home and then split the responsibilities to take care of the kid while the other one works. And these things happen. So they have to work from home. And you know, just saying you have to come back to work is just being, you're not listening, you're not seeing, you're not in touch with what's happening with families and people, or maybe someone that's a caretaker has to take care of a parent and then still do work. So anyways, like listening, it goes back to that listening, right? Like, so I think being able to adapt, as people are moving, changing states of where they live, and people have to kind of come inside to change their compensation structure, how to think about the structure in a larger, being able to adapt, right? You have to kind of think about that is the biggest thing. Being able to adapt to the times and saying, okay, well, yes, we have to think about compensation structure, pay appropriately. Okay, people can work, like, okay, well, yes, people can actually work from home. Let's create like avenues to support them as they work from home, things like that. As opposed to just saying, hey, everyone comes back, we're not changing any of the structure. This is how it has to be. You're like, the world is changing, dude. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that I think I've seen companies do well. Some companies have done that really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, employees are living the dream when I see those kind of organizations doing that. So
yeah, you have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to actively listen and continue to listen as things are shifting rapidly as well. Systems are being redesigned, and we are here for it to, in theory, make them better for the team and the employee overall. Joseph, is there anything I didn't ask that you want to share with our audience, or maybe 1 to 2 key insights you want to underscore so folks can take that with them after they listen to our conversation here today?
Yeah, I mean, I think all in all, it really, basically we've touched on the points I really want to get across, right? It's like as leaders, we build organizations. Having empathy is important, right? Creating, just psychological safety and trust is important. However you want to do that, using tools, using processes, whatever you have to do, that's important. Having data, but not just data, the insights to make those decisions are important, right? Being action oriented is actually important, right? Because yes, you might have the data, you need to make decisions.
Absolutely.
And then finally, being adaptable, being able to adapt as things change is important. So those are the 5 things I would say that as leaders that we should really, just really keep focusing on. I think if we can do that, then we'll create better workspaces, better cultures, better engagement for our organizations, and I think the world will be better for it, right? And so yeah, that's what I'd say.
I would definitely +1 those 5 points. I think that's a great kind of endpoint to our conversation. Joseph, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Reimagining Company Culture. I enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it too as well.
And as a reminder for folks who are listening at AllVoices, we really believe in employee feedback management as a requirement for the company to succeed overall. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.